This is the Financially Simple Podcast, the show dedicated to destroying the complexities of money for today's small business owner. The content in the show is for informational purposes only. This show is not investment advice. Instead, seek help from a competent financial advisor or conduct your own due diligence. Justin Goodbread, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Heritage Investors, a registered investment advisor only conducting business in states where it is properly registered or is excluded or exempted from registration requirements. Registration is not an endorsement of the firm by securities regulators and does not mean the advisor has achieved a specific level of skill or ability. Here's your host, pizza-loving, certified financial planner, Justin Goodbread.
And welcome back to the Financially Simple Podcast. Today we're going to deal with a topic that many of us will deal with in our lifetime. I have personal experience with today's topic, and so I'm going to cover this over a two-part series. We're going to lay the groundwork today on the importance of this topic, and then in our next episode, we will have one of my colleagues, the famous, the infamous Jim Datar, one of my long-term friends and business colleagues, one of the starting founders of our company, Heritage Investors, will be joining us to talk in detail about this topic. What is today's topic? Long-term care. What is it? How do you plan for it? And I want to deal with it as a business owner's perspective. So let me tell you a little bit of backstory. Whenever I was about 16 or 17 years old, my grandmother, my mom's mom, came to live with us. She was in her mid to late 50s. She had developed an early onset dementia. We actually moved our boys' room up into a bonus room over the garage, and Grandma, she moved into our bedroom. It wasn't long before we saw the effects of dementia firsthand. It wasn't also long before I saw the effects of someone caring for dementia firsthand. I can remember the stress that trying to care for Granny put on Mom and Dad, their relationship, us as kids. I can remember in detail the amount of cost it took to care for her. Granny had lived a life that had not prepared her for this particular event of her life. And ultimately, it came to a point to where we had to move Granny to an assisted living facility. Because of her finances, Mom and Dad had to help pay for that assisted living facility. Here I am at 16, 17 years old at the time whenever families are typically traveling and doing things, preparing for school, and we are now caring for Grandma, Mom's mom, in the house. So I know all too well long-term care. I know all too well about it. Currently, we have clients. I can think of one client in particular. His wife has a PhD, a doctorate level education. Very, very savvy individual. When we first met her, she could, unbelievable, charge hell with a water pistol, as I like to say. Lo and behold, she developed dementia at an early age, before the age of 60. And she's recently turned 60, and now she is full-time living in an assisted living facility. So I want to deal today with the topic of long-term care. And I want you to think about as business owners. We're not thinking oftentimes about us. We're thinking about those ahead of us, like my mom and dad, were in the prime of their life now caring for family members. And it's their honor. They would never complain. Never complain. Neither would you, neither would I. It was an honor to serve those who served us through all those years. I get that. But nonetheless, if you're in your 50s caring for a parent who now is faced with that particular situation, it could devastate your business. Or let's put you as the business owner. You now have reached that pinnacle. You have worked your entire life to grow this business. And now you're going to sell your business and you're living life. And in the remaining 5, 6, 7, 10 years of your life, now those children, your children, are in their pinnacle of life. And now they have the potential to have to care for you. So I want to deal with this subject that as we age, especially in today's climate with the sheer number of baby boomers in the United States, and for that matter, the world, as we age, we're going to deal a lot more and more with long-term care. So over the next two podcasts, I want to first lay out what is it, so we have a clear understanding of what it is. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. So I want to talk about what is long-term care, and then how do we plan for it? You know, it's easy to say, let's go buy an insurance policy, but there's so many different ways we can utilize planning for long-term care. You say, Justin, I'm young. I'm in my 30s. Great. Your parents aren't. And you soon have to deal with these things. So let's get a little quick lesson on long-term care. So what is long-term care? Long-term care is services provided to help people live as independently and safely, there's the key word, independently and safely as possible when they can no longer perform everyday activities on their own. So the most common types of long-term care is personal care, and is helping with this term called activities of daily living. Activities of daily living. That's a term that is an insurance term. It's also a legal term that has a triggering event is what the term is, or cause of the long-term care to become formalized. So long-term care is when you're trying to help somebody perform to live as independently as possible and as safely as possible whenever they cannot do these activities of daily living. So what are these activities of daily living? They're pretty standard. So let's go through them. Bathing. If you cannot bathe yourself, can't take a shower by yourself, then you have a potential triggering event. So bathing. If you cannot brush your teeth, comb your hair, style your hair, that's called grooming or personal hygiene. That is an activity of daily living. Dressing. I was thinking on dressing, not to make light of the situation, but more to magnify the situation. I'm trying to get back in shape. We're out of tax season now, and typically tax season is 80, 90 hours a week. And now it's summertime, so I get to get that, as I like to call it, the beach body, right? And I was doing some lunges with my workout buddy. He wanted to do like 100 lunges in one day. So I was like, okay, let's do it. Holy cow, I couldn't even bend over and pull my pants up the next day. My legs were killing me. My glutes, everything was killing me. Think about it. After a hard workout, how hard it is to get your pants up. Now put some age on you. You can't bend over and pull your pants up. You can't put a dress on. That's an activity of daily living. I don't mean to be crude here, but it's called toileting. If you can't get off the toilet, if you can't clean yourself or sit down and get back up, then that's an activity of daily living. There's one called transferring, and that basically means your functional mobility, how you're able to walk from one place to another. Can you get in and out of a chair? Can you use a walker? Can you use a wheelchair? And then are you able to feed yourself? Can you just feed yourself? Now, that doesn't mean cooking, but it means are you able to physically pick up a fork and put it in your mouth? So any of those particular events are what's called an activity of daily living. There's also another event that triggers, and that is dementia and or Alzheimer's. Dementia and or Alzheimer's. You may be able to bathe, transfer, get on off the toilet, function, but you may not, as my grandma was, you may not be of sound mind to know why you're doing things. So if we understand what long-term care is, and that is the ability to perform everyday activities on our own, or the help in creating independence and safely perform those activities, which are basically, like we just talked about, bathing, combing or grooming, dressing, toileting, and I'm using that from being too crude, transferring, feed ourselves, or Alzheimer's and dementia. If we understand that's what long-term care is, then one would ask the question, well, how big of a problem is it? I mean, what's the chances of me? I mean, I'm 40 years old. I used to think 40 was old. I think everybody says that. Now I'm sitting here going, man, I'm 40 years old. I got another 50 years ahead of me, I hope. I'm not going to have to deal with this for a while. Yeah, okay, here's some facts. 75% of people 65 or older will need long-term care assistance. 75%. About 80 million Americans will turn 50 over the next 18 years. That means that about one person every 8 seconds will turn 50. Think about the sheer number of people in the next 18 years. They're going to be 50. 75% of them will need long-term care. That's about one every 8 seconds, a person who's going to need care. By 2020, baby boomers, as we talked about, 1 in 3 workers, 1 in 3, 33% of baby boomers will be faced to provide some form of long-term care to a parent. One of my favorite heroes of the financial world, Rick Edelman. Love to listen to him. He's inspired me greatly. He works in the planning world for individuals. He no longer serves clients. I wish he did, but he became so popular he no longer serves. He no longer takes clients. He just recently had an aunt who died at age 87 years old. She fell and broke her neck. She was dealing with some dementia. She was dealing with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is the 6th leading cause of death right now in America. I believe we're going to see that number increase. Listen to this. 16 million, currently 16 million, provide unpaid care for their loved ones. Now, if you think about the sheer number of baby boomers who are going to be retiring, about 1 every 8 seconds, that 16 million is going to drastically increase over the next few years. Over 18 billion with a B, billion unpaid hours are placed right now. Currently, 18 billion unpaid hours are placed into helping people care for their parents. That equates to roughly $200 billion of cost. A third of caretakers right now are over the age of 65. 2/3 of caretakers are women. 1/3 of caretakers are daughters. So my mom would have fallen into that 1/3 of caretakers are daughters, or the 2/3 caretakers are women. 25% of caretakers are taking care of an older person while they're trying to take care of someone under the age of 18. That was my mom. Since the year 2000, death from heart disease is down 9%. However, death from Alzheimer's is up 145% just since the year 2000. Alzheimer's kills more people than breast and prostate cancer combined. Alzheimer's will cost the U.S. economy $300 billion, and by the year 2050 is estimated to cost us about $1 trillion. 60 million people have Alzheimer's. 1 in 10 are older than 60. 2/3 are women. 1 in 3 are at age 85, and 1 in 2 are at age 90. Friends, if that doesn't wake you up to say, well, I'll never have to deal with it. No, you may not have to deal with it. I may not have to deal with it. But as a business owner, what do we do whenever our loved ones need us? What do we do? I mean, you're talking about my mama. Am I going to take my mama and throw her into a nursing home? Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid.
You're listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. Show your support by subscribing to this and our other educational business channels at financiallysimple.com.
So what typically happens then is we end up trying to figure out a way how to insure it. Now we can self-insure. I know many business owners who do that. And they have to have a plan in place. You can actually write documentation into your business agreements that make this happen. And some people buy insurance. Some people subrogate it. And we're going to have Jim on next episode to talk about how the insurance aspects of it work. But I'm going to give you some more statistics today to kind of help lay the severity of this particular need that we deal with. The national average right now, currently, the national average for long-term care assistance is approximately, are you ready? $80,000. For 1 year in a nursing home, it's approximately $80,850. That's the national average. Of course, places like Boston and New York City will be pushed somewhere in the neighborhood of $120,000 a year. And perhaps here in East Tennessee, where cost of living is lower, or I was talking to a friend of mine out in Utah where cost of living is lower, you may get somewhere in the $40,000 a year range. Think about that. Can you at this point, at your age of 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, can you at this point of your life float out an extra $30, $40, $50, $60, $120,000 a year to care for your parents? Or maybe you're listening to this podcast and you're in your 50s and 60s. Will your children be able to shell out $80, $100, $120, $40,000 more a year to help care for you? You say, well, Justin, I have plenty of assets. We're going to talk about that. Just think about the sheer numbers. My grandmother was in an assisted living facility for over 15 years. $120,000 a year for 15 years. That's a ton of money, folks. That's almost $2 million. Do you have that sort of cash after you've already lived in retirement for a while? I mean, guys, we're dealing with a major issue here. About 70% of all single people and about 50% of all couples spend their entire savings within the first year of entering a nursing home. 75% of single people and 50% of couples spend all of their money the very first year. If you're in my grandma's situation or one of my clients' situation, you not only broke yourself and all the years that you've been working in your business, all that stuff that you've been accumulating, all the investments that we're talking about here very soon, you just wasted it all because of long-term care. I shouldn't say wasted. You used it in an avenue that you probably didn't intend for. That's a better way to say that. 92% of all long-term care insurance claims are for 3 years or less. 45% of long-term care claims are for more than 6 years. So for 3 years, do you have $380,000 if you live in New York or Boston? We were talking with one of our listeners who's in Boston. Do you have $360,000? Think about that. For every one person receiving long-term care in a nursing home, there are 4 people receiving it at home for home health care. So for every one person in the nursing home, there's 3 people at home. I would personally never like to see my mother go into a nursing home. Think about this. This is the woman who birthed me. This is the woman who fed me, clothed me, along with my father. You think I want to throw her in a nursing home? Heaven forbid. I want to see her taken care of at home. But the cost of that ends up being a little bit more. The annual cost of lost productivities for companies, I found this in a stat somewhere, for long-term care responsibilities to their employees is roughly $25 billion a year, or $4,000 per employee. So now I've been focusing on you as the business owner, saying, what happens to you? What happens in your person if your parents or you have to deal with long-term care? Now let's put it into the business. What happens if your key employee's parent is faced with long-term care issues? Your key employee, I'm talking about your right-hand person, male or female, doesn't matter. What happens all of a sudden now they're having to take care of their mom? What's that going to do to your company? Do you have plans in place to deal with this? You said, Justin, I never thought about that. Friend, if you haven't thought about this, I don't know who your advisor is, but you need a new one, because this is something we deal with on a regular basis here. This is risk management. It doesn't do us any good to get into growing the value of your company if you haven't done the things to preserve the value. One of the things you have to do to preserve the value of your company is to make sure that your team members are also taken care of. Well, Justin, how do you deal with that? Well, we're going to get to that. Here's some more stats for you, and then we're going to be done with this particular episode. Just trying to lay the groundwork. I really want you to understand this. So many clients, when they come into the office, this is often like the thing way out in the future. We'll deal with it at some point in the future, and it's really devastating. It's something you have to deal with sooner than you often think. Genworth Life Insurance, some people call it GE. Genworth Life Insurance has the largest long-term care. It was the largest long-term care insurance company for a while. In fact, I believe, and I'm going to have Jim verify this, I believe they quit selling insurance. I don't think they even sell it anymore because most people use long-term care insurance. In fact, they underpriced it. So many companies that used to sell it no longer offer it because it's being used a lot. And here's some stats that Genworth provided. Since 1974, they have paid over 162,000 cases of long-term care. They've paid over $7.7 billion with a B, $billion of long-term care insurance benefits through the end of 2011. So that's just through 11. Here we are in 2019, and we now have the baby boomers now retiring one every 8 seconds. How much more long-term care insurance claims do you think they're going to pay? The youngest claimant ever that they have recorded was 27 years old. 27 years old. The oldest claimant ever was 103. Genworth's longest claim was 18.7 years. My grandmother was on claim for 15 years. The largest single claim was $1.2 million. 71% had been paid to women. Genworth pays about $4.3 million in claims. This is as of 2011. This is the most updated stat I could find. In 2011, Genworth was paying $4.3 million in claims every day. Every business day. 50% of claims were to pay for mental disorders such as Alzheimer's or dementia. Friends, we're dealing with a major issue, and if you think as a business owner that you're immune to this, you're not. Not only do you have the possibility that you personally could be dealing with a parent, or if you're older in business, as you're listening to this, which we do have a couple of 60 and 70-year-olds who listen to the podcast, and I appreciate that, by the way. I'm humbled that you spend your time listening to me trying to provide some information to you. But if you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, could your children deal with this? Or, more devastating to your net worth, potentially, what happens if one of your key team members deals with this? So I wanted to give you some information today. If I tried to do this in one episode on how you actually now deal with this particular claim, it would go for about 45 to almost an hour. So I want to leave it at that today. Next episode, my business partner, longtime friend and colleague who has certifications in this particular field is going to come on the show and talk with us about ways that we can deal with this particular concern. Friends, this is not my area of expertise. I don't deal in this area much, so I know people who do. That's why Jim has become such a vital asset to me. So he's going to be on the show next episode. You get to hear one of our team members kind of just talk with us. But for now, let's just leave it at this and say it's an issue. Long-term care is an issue that we're all going to deal with at some capacity. We are going to deal with this in some capacity. So we need to know about it. In the next episode, we're going to talk about now, how do we deal with it? So with that, friends, life is hard. Think about these stats that I've been quoting. Life is hard. It is. Can't imagine one of my clients who's 60 years old, who's supposed to be retired and traveling the world. As he said, now my wife runs naked down the sidewalk and I have to go catch her. He said, Justin, if it wasn't so sad, it'd be funny. Life is hard, but life is good. And life can be frustrating. Money doesn't have to be. Let's continue to make our lives at least financially simple. Hey, y'all go out and make it a great day.
You've been listening to the Financially Simple Podcast. For more business and personal financial help and information, head over to financiallysimple.com today.